All right, everybody. Good evening. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining. Some great stuff on the Parsha. I'm really looking forward to sharing this with everybody. Just before we get started, one of our past students, Yonatan, he asked me to dedicate the shiur to a dear friend of his who unfortunately passed away. His name is Binyamin ben Binyamin. And so the learning that we're doing tonight is in the memory of Binyamin ben Binyamin, and the enrichment that we take with us will be for ourselves, but also in his memory as well. And also, just as a separate tefillah, the number of cases of coronavirus here in Israel is really skyrocketing in a very scary way. So we should have in mind to help all those here who are suffering and to stop this outbreak as soon as possible. And also, I know in North America, especially in the South, there are a lot of places that are still being hit very hard, and definitely our thoughts or prayers are with them as well. Okay, so the part of the Parsha, Matot, we have a double Parsha, but the first Parsha that we're going to read is Parsha Matot, and there's a section that maybe you've had a chance to delve into, maybe not. Seems somewhat repetitive, maybe something you kind of skipped over, but there is so much to glean from it, and this is the beauty of revisiting the Parshiyot each and every year, of seeing them again, seeing new things, and seeing beautiful stories and beautiful lessons unfold. So tonight I'd like to talk about the power of listening. And when we think about leadership qualities, we think about being a courageous person, being a strong person, being a person who inspires with their words. I'm sure that there's a lot of other characteristics that we would say off the top of our head when we think about leadership. Being a great listener might not make even the top 5. However, we see in this Parsha, Moshe's listening as something very powerful. We're going to see that. We're really going to see what an incredible close listener Moshe is, and how he really steers the nation in the right direction. And hopefully that's something we can take and integrate into our own lives and think about, as opposed to thinking about what we say, thinking about how we can listen to others, and how that's a very powerful tool that we have as leaders. And I also want to get into and touch on the power of unity of Am Yisrael, of the Jewish people, 12 disparate tribes, all bringing their unique talents, their unique paths together, and maintaining a single wholeness, even though they are a disparate group. Okay, so those are the things I want to touch on tonight through the story of Gad and Reuven and Chetzi Shevet Menashe, half of the tribe of Menashe, and the East Bank. We're always hearing about the West Bank of the Jordan River on the news or wherever we turn. Tonight we're going to talk about the East Bank of the Jordan River. Okay, now I want to start off with a really nice quote that frames the discussion we're going to have. This is from a gentleman named Peter Nolte. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, and I don't know who he is, but I found this quote about listening that I thought was very poignant. So he says the following: "Of all the skills of leadership, listening is the most valuable and one of the least understood. Most captains of industry listen only sometimes, and they remain ordinary leaders. But a few, the great ones, never stop listening. That's how they get word before anyone else of unseen problems and opportunities." Okay, so the power of listening is what he says here is the most valuable skill of leadership. Keep that in mind as we now delve into this story. Now, we're kind of in the middle of Parshat Matot here, and we're on the heels of a great military victory between Sichon and Og. These are big military powerhouses in the Middle East at this time, and Am Yisrael has just dealt both of them a crushing victory, and to the victor goes the spoils, so the saying says. So all of the spoils of war go to Am Yisrael, and they're divided up amongst the tribes. So at this point, before, and this is really just on the heels of Am Yisrael expecting to go into Eretz Yisrael, there are some tribes that are really weighed down with lots of stuff. Okay, and that's where we jump into our parsha. So the Reubenites, the tribe of Reuven, and the Gadites, the tribe of Gad, owned cattle in very large number. Okay, so they had a lot of, cattle back then was wealth. Okay, so these two tribes, because of their numbers, based on the spoils of war, became exceedingly wealthy. Now, there's nothing particularly wrong with wealth in general. It's really how you use it. But we'll see that Reuven and Gad get themselves into trouble with their large amount of wealth and this great amount of cattle that they have. Noting that the land of Jazer and Gilead were regions suitable for cattle, Gad and Reuven came to Moshe, Eleazar the priest, and the chieftains, the heads of the communities. And they said something shocking. Here's what they said. Atarot, Dibon, Yazer, Nimra, Heshbon, Eliach, Sama, Nibon, Beon. Okay, these are the cities in the area where they are right now on the eastern side of the Jordan. The land that the Lord has conquered for the community of Israel is cattle country. Kind of feel like that should have a southern accent. Right, Shira? It's cattle country. And your servants have cattle. Hey, the whole area on the eastern side of the Jordan is great for grazing. And you know what? We have tons of cattle. So we have a great idea. It would be a favor to us, they continued, if this land were given to your servants as a holding. Do not move us across the Jordan. Okay, in other words, we don't need to go over to the land of Israel. We're going to stay right here. This land is conquered. We have a claim to it now based on our conquering it. We'll just stay here. What do you think, Moshe? Sounds like a good idea? You know, by the way, if we stay here, then there's more land on the west side of the Jordan River to divide amongst the other 10 tribes. So works good for us, works good for you. This is good for us and our cattle. What do you say? So Moshe doesn't seem too excited about this. Okay, that's an understatement. Moshe replies to Gad and Reuven, are your brothers to go to war while you stay here? Now just listen carefully to the way that Moshe reads this, how he hears them and what they're really asking for. So Moshe's reply, he doesn't hold back. He is very strong with them as he retorts back to them. Are your brothers going to go to war while you stay here? What are you thinking? How could you put forth such a plan? We're all going to all have to go fight and conquer all of the other tribes, all of those who are currently in the land of Israel, and you're going to sit here? Why will you turn the minds of Israelites from crossing into the land that the Lord has given them? That is what your fathers did when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to survey the land. After going up to Wadi Eshkol and surveying the land, they turned the minds of the Israelites from invading the land that the Lord had given them. Thereupon the Lord was incensed. He was very angry and he swore. Not like a 4-letter word, but he made a vow. None of the men from the 20 years and up who came out of Egypt shall see the land that I promised on oath to Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, for they did not remain loyal to me. None except for Caleb and Yeshua, they remained loyal to me. And the Lord was incensed at Israel. Right? Moshe's getting really biblical on them. Remember how angry the Lord got? Remember that whole Chet HaMeraglim, the sin of the spies? 40 years, they had to wander all around. They had to die off. They weren't allowed into Eretz Yisrael. Your parents, none of them are here right now. Remember that? Right? God was angry. Let's not go down that path again. And now you, a breed of sinful men, have replaced your fathers and still further to the Lord's wrath against Israel. If you turn away from him and he abandons them once more in the wilderness, you will bring calamity upon all the people. Don't you see what you're doing? You're putting fear in the people's hearts. You're telling them that you don't want to go across. And this is a retelling, a reliving of the Chet HaMeraglim, of the sin of the spies. Okay, so Moshe immediately hears this in a way that is very extreme. And he sees them as backing away from war, backing away from a connection with the greater nation, sitting back while everybody else has to go in and fight. Moshe sees this as a linchpin to calamity, and he sees this as spreading. Maybe other tribes will say, you know what, Moshe, that's a good idea. Reuven and Gad, we'll also stay over here. And maybe this is something that's going to be akin to the sin of the spies. Now, we have to think about this, and we're going to in a minute. Is it really as bad as that? I mean, is it a one-to-one comparison? Is it exactly what is what Reuven and God said exactly what the spies said? We're going to have to fill in the blanks and think about that. But Moshe's initial reading about this is very, very harsh, and he jumps down their throat. So now God and Reuven respond, and they step up. You can see them kind of meekly with their heads down, eyes down. Moshe, you misunderstood. They stepped up to him and said, we will build here sheepfolds for our flocks and towns for our children. Okay, we're going to set up a whole area over here, okay, for the sheep and for the kitties. Okay, we'll set up something for the families over here. But don't worry, and we will hasten to as shock troops in the van of the Israelites. Chalutzim is the word in Hebrew, which has a connotation of pioneers as well. I guess it means they're going to go across and they're going to fight, but they're not necessarily going to dwell there. So we'll just call them Chalutzim. I don't know why it uses shock troops here. It sounds like something out of Star Wars or something. Anyway, and we will hasten the shock troops in the van of Israelites until we have established them in their home, while their children stay in the fortified towns because of the inhabitants of the land. We will not return to our homes until every one of the Israelites is in possession of his portion. Okay, now here they add on. Moshe isn't necessarily looking for them to stay until everybody else gets their home. He just doesn't want them to sit back while everybody else is at war. But Reuven and God say, we're going to go above and beyond. You didn't understand us. And so what we'd like to do is we're not even going to return home until everybody gets their portion, until the land is not only conquered, but it's all divided up and all the other 10 tribes get their portion. But we will not have a share with them in the territory beyond the Jordan, for we have received our share on the east side of the Jordan. We're going to be over here. We're going to help you guys. We're going to set up our sheep and set up our women and set up our children over here. We'll fight with you. We'll fight with you to the end till everything is done, and only then will we return. So Moses says to them, okay, Moshe seems to calm down and says to them, if you do this, if you go to battle as shock troops, as Chalutzim, at the instance of the Lord, and every shock fighter amongst you cross the Jordan, right? Not just some of you, everybody at the assistance of the Lord, until he dispossessed his enemies before him, right? Until they're totally finished in battle and the land has been subdued and at the assistance of the Lord. And then you return, you shall be clear before the Lord and before Israel, and this land shall be holding under the Lord. In other words, if you do everything that you just said, okay, then you can have this land over here. But if you do not, you have sinned against the Lord and the sin will overtake you. In other words, if you don't do what you said, it's going to be bad for you. Let's not go there. But if this is what you're actually offering, says Moshe, I will accept it. Okay? So Moshe says, build towns for your children and your sheepfolds, for your flocks, but do what you have promised. And now, the Gadites, right? Gad and Reuven answer back, your servants will do as my Lord commands. Whatever you say, Moshe, just give us the land over here. We're in. We'll do it. Our children, our wives, our flocks, and all the other livestock will stay behind in the towns of Gilad, which is the area again on the east bank, while the servants, all those recruited for war, cross over at the instance of the Lord to engage in battle as my Lord orders. Okay? So basically, what's happened so far, I'm trying to think there's a bit of a repetition here. We're going to go over why there is in a minute. But basically, the bottom line here is as follows. Reuven and God say, hey, Moshe, we're going to stay over here on the east side where we just conquered all this land. We got lots of sheep. Let us stay over here. Moshe says, no way, Jose. You're not going to abandon us. What you're doing sounds a lot like the Chet HaMeraglim. Cut it out right now, or else we're all going to spend, we're never going to make it into Eretz Yisrael. We'll all be in the desert forever. So they say, no, you misunderstood us. What we'd really like to do is just set up camp over here on the east side, but all of the fighters will go on the west side. We'll all fight together, and until the territory is conquered and everything has taken place, then we'll come back and we'll live here. Moshe says, if that's the plan, no problem, we can do that. Now, there's one more point here I want to add that we're going to touch on as well. Moshe at the very end says, Moshe assigned to them, to Gad, Reuven, and half tribe of Manasseh, Chetzi Shevet Manasseh, the son of Yosef, the king of Sichon. Okay, in other words, Moshe says, good, Gad, Reuven, you guys can have this land, and also half the tribe of Manasseh. Now, half the tribe of Manasseh didn't request to stay on the east side of the Jordan. They haven't been involved in any discussion at all. But here, suddenly, at the very end, as they're kind of closing the deal, so to speak, Moshe adds a little small addendum. God, Reuven, everything you said, thumbs up if you do it, and Chezi Shevet Manasseh as well. And I imagine everyone's looking at each other, and probably the tribe of Manasseh as well, and saying, where do we get involved in this? We didn't want this. We're ready to go over. Okay, so we have to figure out why Moshe, kind of at the end here, slips in half the tribe of Manasseh, and why only half? Why not all of Manasseh? Okay, if it's a nice place to live and Manasseh would enjoy being there, maybe they also have a lot of sheep. Have the whole tribe be there. Why are you going to split the tribe half on one side of the Jordan, half on the other side? Okay, important question there. That's in general the story, and I think easily one could read over this and wonder, okay, what's going on here? Why is this important? And boy, does this seem redundant. Okay, so I want to peel back the layers with you guys for the next few minutes and show you how incredible the Torah is in its exactness in the language that it uses. And we're going to see how incredible of a listener Moshe Rabbeinu is, because he hears so much of what's being said, but as every good listener and every good leader knows, you have to hear beyond what's being said to really what's being said, to the words underneath the words, so to speak. Okay? So now, the first issue that we're going to get into, is this really akin to the sin of the spies? Okay, Moshe made a big deal about this. He really jumped down their throat. I mean, it wasn't exactly one for one. It's not like they sent in spies and then Reuven and God came back and said, bad place to go, don't go in. They didn't say anything about Eretz Yisrael. They just said, we'd like to be here. Okay? So what was so problematic about what they said in Moshe's eyes that he has to give them such harsh rebuke? So Rashi says the following. Because they will think that you are afraid to pass over on account of the prospect of war and the strength of the cities and the peoples. Okay? In other words, it's true, says Moshe. I understand you weren't speaking negatively about the land of Israel and our inability to conquer it, right? If you remember several weeks back when we did Parshat Shlach Lecha, we said that the argument that the 10 tribes made, the 10 leaders made, was that militarily they were unable to conquer it. And so Rashi says, what was it that made Moshe so bad? It's not the exact same thing. No, there's a kernel there in that story that is the same as the sin of the spies. And that is, there sounds like there's something going on here, and maybe you're afraid. And just like those 10 leaders shared their fear with the nation, and that fear broke out like a plague, and no one wanted to go into Eretz Yisrael, people are going to hear your words, but not just hear what you're saying. They're going to hear something underneath it, like I am. They're going to hear underneath the words, and they're going to understand that the reason that you really don't want to go is not just because you have a lot of sheep, and not just because it's good for grazing here, but because you're really afraid to fight the battles of these mighty nations that are in the land of Israel. So therefore, I'm going to stomp out this before it spreads. Okay, so this is Rashi's understanding of why Moshe gets so upset and the connection between the sin of the spies. Now, that's a bit of a stretch. It doesn't necessarily have to be read that way. And if we want to dan l'chav zchut, if we want to look through the eyes of Reuven and God and maybe see it through their perspective and not read it that way, there are other ways to read it. And the Kli Yakar, another commentator, indeed has another reading of what it was that was their intention. That seems much less harsh. Nevertheless, it's still a problem. So let's see what the Kli Yakar says. So he says, כי אמרו שסמוך לגבול הספר נבנה תחילה דירות צאן ולמקנהו ואחר כך תוך הארץ לפני הערים לטפנו. So basically what the Kli Yakar says is, well, if we look very closely at what they said, and we're going to see more of this in a second, they asked first in order to build houses for their sheep. Okay, this is what I'm highlighting right here. First, when God and Reuven came, they asked for building sheepfolds, I guess, places to hold their sheep. That's what they asked for first. So it says the Theokar, what they were asking for first was to build just homes for the sheep over here, but then only afterwards they wanted to build Arim Litapenu. They wanted to build cities for their kids on the west side. Okay, so they were never saying that they really only wanted to live on the east side. First, they wanted to set up camp on the east side, but then they wanted to have the schools and the educational framework and the community on the west side. That's all they were asking. They weren't asking to not go in at all or not to have any connection. That's what the Kli Yakar says. Nevertheless, he continues, Makom Makom, Hochicham Moshe. Nevertheless, Moshe still had to give them rebuke. V'amar ken eretem b'tuchin t'shuat Hashem. Nevertheless, even if you have this plan to put the sheep first, in case any enemies come, they'll attack the sheep. They won't attack the children, right? The sheep will be kind of a ploy. The kids will be okay. It still sounds like you're afraid. It sounds like you're using the sheep as a ploy to keep the children safe. But if you really have faith in God and you think that Hashem is really giving us the land of Israel, you don't need these kind of plans. It's not necessary. So therefore, says the Kli Yakar, similar to Rashi, I still sense a lack of faith. Okay, as opposed to a sense of fear that Rashi was talking about and an excuse, here the Kli Yakar says there's a lacking in your faith. Have faith that Hashem is going to protect your sheep, protect your children. This is going to go well for us. You see how it's gone so far. Everything is good. Believe in God and don't try to spread a lack of faith amongst the community. We know when that happens, bad things happen. Okay, so those are two explanations why it is that Moshe really, really gets so upset at them when their initial asking doesn't seem to be so problematic. Now, I want to look a little bit more at the way that Gad and Reuven act. And here we really see the power of Moshe's listening and his ability to really set them straight. Now, go back to the moment where Gad and Reuven approach Moshe initially, and they say, we will build here sheepfolds for our flocks and towns for our children. That's what they want to do. Okay. Now, look very closely at the order here. First, they want to build Dorotzon. They want to build sheepfolds, sheep houses, pens. And then only after the sheep pens, they want to build cities for the kids. They want to build the educational institutions. In other words, where's our priority? Our priority is with the sheep, i.e. the money. First, we got to protect the money, and then we'll build schools for the kiddies. And Moshe does not like this at all. Look what Moshe says back to them. When he says that they are able to stay and they can do it, look at this. This is amazing. What does he say to them? Banu lechem arim letapechem. First, you build towns for your children, and then galot etzonechem. And then only afterwards. Okay? In other words, you guys, Moshe is saying to them, I hear what you're saying. There's something subtle in the language that you're using that I have a big problem with. You guys have your priorities mixed up. Switch your money and your kids, okay? Education goes first. Take care of your kids and then take care of your money. That's the most important thing. You guys got mixed up here. You're so focused on your money, you're missing the big picture. And actually what happens is Gad and Reuven hear this. And when they respond to Moshe in something that seems very repetitive because it's for the third time we said it, but if we look closely, it's amazing. What do they say when they retort to Moshe, when they answer back to Moshe? V'yomer b'nei Gad u'b'nei Reuven el Moshe le'imol avdecha yasu kasher Adoni mitzaveh. We'll do exactly as you say. Tapeinu nashenu miknenu. They got it right. First their kids, and then the wives. Forgot about them. They're also important. And then the sheep. Okay? So not only does Moshe hear them, and Moshe sets them straight, but they hear Moshe. And they understand that their priorities were off, and therefore when they when they repeat back to Moshe what they're going to do, they say to him clearly, and they repeat back to him so he understands, we get it. We understand that our priorities were out of place. Tapenu, nashenu, miknenu. Kids, wives, and then the money, and then the sheep. Okay, and now Rashi points this out very beautifully. Exactly what we're saying here. They paid more regard to their property to their sons and daughters because they mentioned their cattle before their children. Okay, Rashi, like all of Chazal, are very close readers in the text. And that close reading here, you see, elucidates something very, very beautiful that we might have missed over. Moshe says, not so. Make the chief thing the chief thing. Make what's the ikar, and the tafel. What's subordinate, what's secondary is secondary. First, build cities for the little ones, and afterwards, enclosures for your flocks. Okay, so that's Moshe making sure that they keep their priorities straight. Now, the Midrash here steps off and takes this a step further. And just for time's sake, I'll just share it outside. But it goes on and looks further in the Tanakh and says, by the way, Gad and Reuven, they're the first ones that are carried off in exile. Because when the tribes come from the north to exile the Jewish people, right, to exile Am Yisrael from the land, Gad and Reuven and Chetzi Shevet Manasseh are the first to go. The Midrash points the finger at them and says, it's because you guys focused on your money too much, and you didn't want to be in the west bank, on the west side, with the rest of Am Yisrael. Therefore, you're weaker, you're more susceptible, and you were the first ones to go. So you had your priorities out of whack, and the Midrash says, and therefore you had to pay the price for it. You were the first ones to go into exile. Okay, that's the first point. Sorry, the second point. The third point I want to share with you, and we won't be able to see all this inside, but it's the following. If one looks closely at the text, whenever Gad and Reuven are speaking, okay, we will build here sheepfolds for our flocks, towns for our children. We will go in, it's chalutzim, we're going to fight, we're going to do everything, all the things that they promised. We won't return home until everybody is in possession of their portion. That whole section, okay? The Abarbanel points out, they did not mention God's name once. They talked about Moshe, they talked about sheep, they talked about fighting for Am Yisrael. Those things are fine, but they did not mention God's name once, points out the Abarbanel, in their whole presentation, and even when Moshe rebuked them, and they came back and said, no, we're going to go over, not one time did they mention God's name. Now, when Moshe repeats it back to them, realizing this, he says the following, you have to do this lifnei Hashem. Don't forget what this is about. Don't forget Hashem in all of this, okay? Such a clear lesson that I think can speak to all of us. Consumerism can totally blind us to missing God's face in our life. It needs to be lifnei, from the word panim, before, but also in front of. It has to have the face of God. This has to be as if we're standing before God. If God's face is not in front of us, if we don't realize we're in the presence of Hashem during this whole endeavor, then the whole thing is just totally misplaced. Okay, so Moshe says, Lifnei Hashem. He goes back and he says it. It's from Hashem. He makes very clear. He says it over and over again. And again, right? Moshe's hearing of them not saying Hashem's name, his very clear repetition of it, but putting in the name of Hashem. And then again, Gad and Reuven, when they retort, they also say, okay, we heard you, and we'll do it also, Lifnei Hashem. Whoops, we forgot about God. Thank you, Moshe, for setting us straight. Okay, again, just a small subtlety in the text that we might have missed had not the Abarbanel pointed us in this direction. Okay. And last but certainly not least, this is a fantastic way to leave us this evening. If we remember at the very end, Manasseh is thrown into the mix. As Moshe's talking, Gad, Reuven, and Chetzi Shevet Manasseh, and half of Manasseh. You guys are going to go over too. And I mentioned they're probably looking around at each other saying, what happened here? Why us and why only half of us? Okay, so the Abarbanel says as follows. Why is it that Gad and Reuven wanted to be on the other side? Well, okay, before I say that, I'm going to say the Emek Devar. The Emek Devar, the Netziv says as follows. Well, the reason that Moshe wanted to put half of Shevet Menashe there is because he wanted to have a tribe that was very strong in Torah with them. In other words, he was very concerned about no mentioning of God, overwhelmed by money. He's concerned that the Torah facet, the focus on God and Torah, is going to be totally missed. So what is he going to do? He's going to put Chetzi Shevet Menashe. These are the Talmidei Chachamim, the Torah leaders. He's going to put half of that tribe, which is filled with Torah leaders. He goes through, by the way, it's interesting, we won't have time for this, but he goes through the future generations of the tribe of Menashe and shows how they are leaders in Am Yisrael and great Talmidei Chachamim, great Torah scholars. So all you need is half of them. We're going to put half of them over there, and that will keep you guys on the straight and narrow. Moshe is concerned, leaving them over there on the other side, that they're going to fall and they're going to lose their connection with Torah. So says the Emek Devar, I'm going to put half of tribe of Menashe to keep you guys in line, to put the Talmidei Chachamim over there, to make sure you don't forget the important lessons that I'm emphasizing to you today. And just to add on to that, why half? Okay, this is something that I'm adding on my own. Moshe wanted to build a bridge between the East Bank and the West Bank. He understood if he put the whole tribe of Menashe over there, then you have 3 tribes on one side and 9 on the other. And what is there going to be to bridge them? They're going to fall apart. They're going to end up in their own kind of culture, their own kind of world, and they're going to be disconnected from the greater picture of Am Yisrael. So I want half that tribe, because I want half on the West Bank and half on the East Bank, and I want those two to come together and to be bridged. Because the power of Am Yisrael is that there are 12 tribes, and of course Shevet Levi as well, which is really 13. And each one of them has their unique gifts and talents, their individual, tribal, family talents. As a whole, we come together as one unified nation, distinct and different, but a whole that is greater than the sum of its parts. And if we lose 2 of the 12 tribes, the whole thing is going to be fractured, and we're not going to be Am Yisrael, which means we're nothing. In other words, if we don't have all of us, we have none of us. And so Moshe wanted to make sure that he maintained the totality, the whole picture of Am Yisrael, because he understood that picture is incomplete without all of us. That the puzzle needs all of the unique, distinct pictures to all come together as one united picture. So therefore, half on one side, half on the other, to bridge the two. I'm going to pause here for this evening and let you guys ask some questions. And I'm going to pause the recordings.